Hi everybody, I'm creating this REDCap Cypress Test Framework video to demonstrate how you can set up the REDCap test framework on your own computer. So this is going to be an instructional video that I'm hoping will allow you to help on the project if you so desire. So without further ado, I'll get started here. So what we're looking at on screen right now is the REDCap Cypress Test Framework repository on GitHub. And to get started with helping on this project is actually pretty easy. All you have to do is download and clone the repository. So the first thing you want to do is click on this clone or download button, and it's going to give you a URL here. And this URL you can copy to your clipboard. So you can click the little button here to mount that to your clipboard. And if you need the URL, it's right up here. It's https://github.com/al REDCap Cypress. So the next thing I'm going to do now that I have the link inside the clipboard here is I'm going to go to my development environment and I'm going to clone it. So I'm going to type in git clone and then I'm going to paste that URL in. And then what my computer did was it downloaded that source repository. So now you can see that I have the REDCap Cypress framework inside the folder. So I'm going to cd into that directory. And then you can see that it's downloaded all of the contents that line up with the Git repository here. You can see they're all the same. So the next thing that I'll do after I've downloaded the repository is I'm going to open up an editor. In this case, I'm going to be showing you Sublime Editor. There's probably other editors that you might prefer to use, but this is the one I'm going to use for the purposes of demonstration because it's a free editor that you all can download. So I'm going to click in here, and you can see again my development environment, and you can see that there's REDCap Cypress folder here. And so the next thing that we need to do is we need to create our configuration files. So there's two example configuration files. There's cypress.json.example and cypress.env.json.example. Both of these files are important. So what I'm going to do is use the example file. I'm just going to do a save as, and I'm going to get rid of that .example. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this file here. And then there you go. I have two of my configuration files. So I have the cypress.json file and I have the cypress.env.json file. So that will get us a base configuration. And for my purposes, I already have I have a Docker instance set up to mount to this base URL at port 8080, so I'm good to go there. If you have a different port that your Docker instance points to, you will need to change that. But for me, port 8080 works. You can change any of these other configuration elements here. In your cypress.env.json file, you can definitely keep all of this just as it is. If you want to test against a different version of REDCap, I'm testing against 9.1.0 here. You can change that. So if I wanted to test against 7.4.4, I would change it to that. So just for the fun of it, maybe I'll change that to 7.4.4. Now, when you change this version of REDCap, what that's predicated on is the fact that you have that source available on your machine. So in my case, I have this folder here that has all the different sources of REDCap that I want to test against, and you can see that I have REDCap 7.4.4 right here, so that would be okay for me to test against. If you don't have that source available, then you're going to need to either download it from the consortium website or find somebody within the consortium that would be able to give you that source code. So moving on here, so we have our two configuration files available, and then you can see that I have a REDCap Docker container right here. So in my, I won't go into how to configure a Docker container because that's outside the scope of this particular video tutorial. But what I will tell you is that if you don't have a Docker container, you can look at Andy Martin's, and in my README file on the Cypress Test Framework, I give you a link to Andy Martin's Docker Compose. So you can click on this link in my README and you can get right there. You could just search in the browser for Andy Martin and you should be able to find his Docker Compose repository. And in case you haven't seen it before, this is what that page would look like. So as I said, the Docker instance is outside the scope of this particular demonstration. But what I'm going to do next now is I'm going to fire up the Cypress framework. Now, before you do anything else, you're going to want to install, run an npm install on your Cypress folder. So just so you can see where I'm working here, so I'm working in this development folder under my user. So I'm going to type in npm install, and then what's going to happen is it's going to install the node modules that are necessary for running Cypress. So you can see Cypress 3.1 is installed to that folder. So the next thing I can do after that then is I type in npx cypress open. And then what that does is that opens the actual debug window here. It might take just a second for it to spool up here. Now, in this debug window, you're going to see that it says Cypress could not verify that this server is running. Well, it can't verify it's running because, in fact, it isn't running. So, but we will fix that by spooling up our Docker container. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my terminal window, and then I'm going to spool up my Docker container. So I have a Docker container sitting here, and I'm going to run docker compose up. Now, like I said, you could download Andy Martin's Docker container and then run a few of the configurations and probably get this working if you don't have your own at this point. Or if you have a different way of running your development environment, you could create a copy of that development environment, call it a test environment, and then you might be able to run the tests against that environment instead. So to review, we have our Cypress framework open here, and we downloaded that and configured the cypress.env.json file, and we configured the cypress.json file. Now that we have now that we've run npx cypress open, we have this window available, which is our debug. And then I also just launched my Docker container by running a Docker Compose up here. So now that those two things have happened, this localhost 8080 is running. So what that means is that I should be able to run tests now. And what I'm going to do now is run this browse projects.js file. So this will run the test scripts, and it really is that simple to have your tests start up now. So I'm going to run through these, and hopefully this will get all things pointed correctly. So as you can see, I changed the REDCap version to 7.4.4, and the tests are actually running against 7.4.4. So the nice part about the framework now, due to some improvements that have recently been made, is that you can test against different different versions of REDCap. And so I'm testing against 7.4.4 here. And after this is done running, I'm going to change that environment variable so you can see that we can easily run against a different version like 9.1.0, for instance. So we'll let these finish out, and then I will show you the same test against 9.1.0. All right, so this last test failed here, and there's a reason for that I'll explain in a moment. All right, so I stopped the tests. Now what I'm going to do is go back to my cypress.env.json. Let's change this to be 9.1.0. I'll save that. And then what happens is that automatically is reflected in our configuration file here. So we can see in the settings tab that it's changed to 9.1.0. If there's ever a question that Cypress knows what your environment variable is, you can go to the settings tab. So let's rerun the browse projects test and see what happens. So what should happen is we should run against 9.1.0 this time. So we can see that it says it's visiting that, and indeed that does look like it's running against the correct instance of REDCap, so that's great. So it really is that easy to change which REDCap instance you are testing against, so long as you have that source code available on your machine. If you have any questions about that, I would be happy to clarify. You can contact me at my email address, which is aldefau@medicine.west.edu. In a moment here, after these tests are finished running, I'm going to show you how you can contribute to this project. And the whole point of this video really is that I'd like to get you excited about what the possibilities are for this framework and show you how easy it is for you to actually contribute and help to contribute to the cause of testing for the consortium. So let's finish out these tests and then I will show you how you can help. So as you'll note, all of the tests passed for 9.1.0, and the reason for that is because on this last test, the REDCap consortium has changed the icon that shows up for the status column, and actually it's hidden out of view right here, but it's right where this blue element is. So it changed to a wrench, and I don't remember what it was before. But the reason that it failed for version 7.4.4 is because that wrench class changed. So the tests, the master branch of the tests currently reflects the newest version of REDCap. But we also have branches that show the different instances of REDCap. So if I go back to my Cypress framework here, you can see that there's a branch for 7.4.4, 7.4.5, 8.1.1, and 9.1.0. So the idea is that we write tests that reflect the status of that code. So, and then as we go forward in version, we have some kind of test that fails for some reason. If it's failed for a reason like an icon changing or something, and we expect that, in my view at least, it's okay for us to change that test to reflect whatever the new status or functionality is. Of course, some of that I'm going to leave up to the committee, but in general, that's how I've got this set up right now. Okay, so I showed you a little bit about how the test framework works, and hopefully you are convinced that it's pretty easy to use. But now I want to show you how you can contribute, because that's the part that I'm excited about, the collaborative aspect of this. So I've been working pretty hard on making this easy for you to contribute, and I've done this through a project that I've set up on the GitHub repository. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for JavaScript programmers who can help us out in writing tests against 7.4.4, which was the first version that I showed you. Or sorry, it's the version that it was the first version that I showed you. I apologize. And this version is the one that we're testing against currently in the committee. So what I've done is I've set this up to have a workflow. So if you go into the core validation test scripts, this is going to put you into a Kanban board where I've organized things by a list of to-dos. Now you can see 2 of these are already in the done column, and that's because I've already written tests for the configuration checklist and browse projects features. And so these are all core functionality test scripts that have been written by the software validation and testing committee. And essentially what I've done is I've translated these 2 into code already. What I'm looking for help in from the consortium is for JavaScript programmers to help out and take charge of some of these other test scripts that need to be translated into code. So essentially what you need to know is you need to know JavaScript. it would be good for you to know the concepts of closures, which I list here, and there's actually a guide for that talks about that here. So if you want to read more about that, you can go to the Projects tab on the repository and click on this document here. It's also helpful to know promises, and again, Cypress has a helpful tutorial on those right here. So if you know anything about JavaScript, you probably can help in some way. And so this project is essentially accessed by clicking on this core validation test scripts link right here. And then when you start working on it, you would drag it to this in progress column. Now, the way that you would practically work on this repository would be to click on the fork button up here. Now, I can't fork it. It says I can't do that because it's my own repository. But you guys will be able to click on this to be able to fork this repository. Now, after you fork the repository, what you can do is after you're done creating a test, you could push it up and then you could do a pull request. Now, I won't show you how to do that because it would be kind of convoluted and difficult to show you that in the scope of this presentation. But if you have trouble doing that, I'm happy to walk you through how to do that. Effectively, the projects in GitHub, if you aren't familiar with them, it's kind of I think it's a newer feature in here, but essentially all it does is it maps these open issues to a Kanban board. And so inside here, I just kind of talk about what the task is and what file you have to edit. So I've tried to make this as foolproof as possible. So for instance, if you wanted to write the test for assign user rights, you would essentially have to modify this file right here. So if you click on this, you can see that I already have the beginnings of this test written. So I have the description here under this describe block, and then I have two of these it blocks, which is where you'd write your actual test spec. So that's kind of how this is laid out. I've got my email address listed here if you have any questions. I have the task written here. The one piece that you don't have is you don't have the test script written in plain English. And the reason that you don't have the test script is because those are all located in a repository that Kim Gajewski manages. And if you want to help on this project, I will work with Kim to get you access to those test specs, because I'm sure that she'll be happy to get you access to that if you want to contribute to this project. So to review then, if you want to help, you would click on this Projects tab, and then you can read through this. It talks about the involvement requirements and the workflow and so on. And then you can click on Core Validation Test Scripts to go through here and choose which part or which test script you'd like to help on. And then if you need to, or if you want to start actually working on that, then what you would do is either contact myself or Kim Gajewski to see if you can get access to those test scripts. That's about all I have to share at this moment, outside of the fact that I can show you some other cool things that are happening in the background here. So there is a past logo on here, and this is actually more than just a static graphic. This is actually a dynamic graphic, and you'll see that every branch of the repository right now is passing. And the reason that it's passing is because they are hooked up to a Circle CI continuous integration test. So this has a circle.yaml file here. It's basically a configuration that I've written to be able to run these tests automatically against Circle CI. So I will show you a little bit of that, just to hopefully pique your interest here. So this is my Circle CI account. And as you can see, all of these branches are appropriately loading. And if I deep dive into here, into this actual test, you're going to see the steps that it goes through to do all this. So I spin up the environment, I check out the code, I install my SQL client, build the image, and so on. And then down here I run the actual tests. And so when I run the tests, all we're doing is running those same tests that you saw in my demo before. We're just running them in sort of a Unix environment. And so it's running through all those same tests, but the cool part is that we're actually running the video against, or we're creating a video out of these tests. So if I go to my Cypress dashboard, which I have over here, well, actually I have to log in here, but if I go to my Cypress dashboard, you're going to see that that we actually made a record of these tests and a video recording of it. So when I ran against master here 7 hours ago, you can see that all of these tests are green. Now, you might be asking why they're green. They're green because they are passing at the moment, but remember that a lot of these test specs are empty right now. However, there are two of them that are not empty. One of them is the Browse Projects test, and that's this one right here. So what happens in the Circle CI project is that it actually runs through this on this Ubuntu server, and so it runs the tests in the simulated environment off on the Circle CI servers automatically when I push to master or any of those branches that I showed you. So what this means is that when you send me your pull request, what I'm likely going to do is I'm going to run them against the Circle CI server to make sure that your tests are doing something reasonable before I would commit them into the standard or into the main repository that I own. So this is kind of a slick way for us to manage this, and the nice part is that this Cypress this Cypress testing dashboard that I have here, I actually have it set up as an account that is a open source project, and what that means is that I actually am allowed to run as many tests as I want. I can do as many test recordings as I want because this is open source, and this is something that I had to apply for, but they accepted the project because they found out that this was an open source project. So this is a pretty cool opportunity to utilize their Cypress dashboard that we may not have to do, or may not have been able to do if we weren't open source. So so that's kind of a large overview, and I know I threw a lot of information at you, but I hope that this video excites you and that it gets you to the point where you want to help with this. I guess the one part I didn't show you was how to actually write the tests, and what I'm going to do is, if you're interested in writing the tests, I can arrange a different video tutorial if you'd like on that. But I just wanted to give you an overview of how you might contribute, and I know a lot of you already know JavaScript. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate you all watching. Thank you. Bye-bye.